Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to my series. My guest for today's session is Stephen Peart. Peart, is that how you say your name?
Peart.
Peart. So Stephen, you and I met at the Brampton Alpha Toastmasters Club a few years ago.
Yeah.
And although I'm not a member anymore, Stephen, you still
Mm.
are a member. Stephen, I remember all your speeches. They were so calming and so inspiring, and they really helped me, through some of the things that I was going through at that time. But I always remember that. I don't remember word for word what you said, but I do remember that you just made me feel very inspired and very, almost like my stress was taken away. So it's like you have that
Oh,
power in your speaking. And
thanks
Stephen
for
is
sharing that.
also an accomplished coach, published author, and writer. And he's always seeking to help people move from where they are to where they want to be. Through the writing workshops that Stephen facilitates, he leverages all of his many skills, guiding individuals to write, listen, respond, and heal. I love that. I love your vision, which is to inspire change through connecting perspectives and sharing stories. And that's why we're here today, to share your story, Stephen. So I'm going to turn it over to you so you can start sharing your story with us.
Well, Roseanne, first, allow me to say thank you for sharing that thought. I didn't realize that I had that impact on your own journey. I still remember when you first joined the club, and you're pretty shy, like everybody else who joined the club. But I've watched you over the years as you've blossomed,
Thank
and now
you.
you're doing your own podcast and
And
show.
it's because of Toastmasters. Honestly, I learned so much when I was there. It was so valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really, really thrilled. And actually, I'll segue into saying this. So this morning, um, on a Saturday morning, typically I usually go for walks with a couple of friends through by the lake shore or through the or alongside Etobicoke Creek. That's one of our favorite spots.
Nice.
However, I was by myself today, and I had a very quiet moment of utter silence. All I could hear was the birds around me, and no joke, sometimes my heartbeat. And so I started writing, and I started sharing a couple of my writings on my social media channel, and then I sent a couple to my mom, and she made a statement. And it's funny, I'm actually leading to this based on what you shared. She said
Uh-huh.
this to me. She said, continue sharing. You never know who you're impacting. And Roseanne, might I tell you, it brought tears to my eyes
That's
because
beautiful.
I've been sharing, and actually, I'll be doing that in my blog this evening because I actually
Mhm.
wrote up on that statement. I've been sharing for over 20 years online and a lot of my writings.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I do get a little disappointed that, oh, I'm not impacting anybody's lives. But the most powerful thing that came to me when my mom made that statement, my immediate thought response was, I'm impacting my own life.
Mhm.
And for a brief moment, I paused and I listened to the thought and I started to reflect on the thought. And I'm just like, yeah, what I've been writing has been impacting my own life. And and that's been the journey that I've actually been on for these years. Is my writing actually started out
Mhm.
of pain, out of circumstances beyond my control, where I felt voiceless, where I felt that I
Mhm.
was being silenced every time I tried to open my mouth to speak. I felt shut down. So I reverted to writing. And that's been my point of healing over the years, is just to write whatever comes out of me. Hence the
Mhm.
term release expressions, which is my brand. It comes out of that idea that everything was bottled up inside. Now I'm getting an opportunity to release it and express it.
That's
Uh,
beautiful.
yeah. So it's been a journey, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and just to hear from you that the
Mhm.
impact that it has had on your life. It's
Right,
really
and I'm just
important.
one person. Imagine all the other people who you don't know who you've touched, especially in social media, because not
Yeah,
everybody, as you know, likes posts or replies or responds. And so you're thinking, okay, I'm putting stuff out there and nobody's even paying attention, but they are. We just don't know it.
yeah, yeah, and that's so true
Yeah.
because we're conditioned to focus on the likes and the followers and
Yes,
the large numbers and
that's right.
everything. And interestingly, to your point, I was thinking about it this week, where I saw somebody that I followed. They're promoting that I think they're up to 12,000 followers right now,
Hmm.
and I'm happy for them. But the thought crossed my mind is, um, are we really focused on the followers and the following, but more so focused on what we're actually bringing, delivering, and
Right.
living?
Exactly. Yes.
And that I find is the most important thing because, there are a lot of content creators out there, um, but are we all living what we are given?
Right. Are we showing up
Are we
the
showing up?
way our authentic selves? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Your posts might come up on people's feeds who are
Mm-hmm.
not following you, but they're still getting your message
Yeah.
and they're still
Yeah.
benefiting from that message.
Oh,
Because
that's powerful.
it's discouraging because when you don't see the followers and it's human nature. We compare ourselves
It
to
is.
everybody out there.
Yep. It is.
People who have been there for 20 years and I'm only here for 1 year and I expect, I want to be like them, but
Yep.
we can't. I always say if one person reads my post, either a true follower or I don't even, it's not a true follower. It's like almost like a legitimate follower or you know what
No,
I mean?
actually, what you just said there is so powerful because you could have 1,000 people following you,
Hmm.
on paper,
Right.
but how many people are living what you are sharing?
Exactly. But
That,
that
that
one
number shrinks
right, but that one
significantly.
person who may not be on my following list, I don't know that they exist, but
Yeah.
I'm reaching them, and that is so amazing.
Yep. Do you know the parable of the I think it was 10 blind men that came to
Uh-huh.
Jesus, and he healed them, or the lepers. I think, no, it was lepers, and he healed
Hmm.
them. How many came back and thanked him?
I
One
one
out of
wow.
10.
Wow. You see, and so he didn't stop.
Yeah, he didn't stop.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
stop. And when you look at life, and I know, and again, it is human nature to
Hmm.
look at the numbers, um, but the reality of it is, as content creators like you and I,
Hmm.
we look more at the value at what which we're presenting,
Yes,
and with the hope that somebody's actually taking that and running with it to
that's
live
right.
it. To live.
Yeah.
You're a perfect example. You sharing your story about when you just came to Toastmasters.
Hmm.
And I remember when you first came in, and I remember when you left, and well, I was heartbroken when
Yes,
you
I
told me,
know.
oh, I'm not coming back. But in the same vein, I was excited for you because I saw the person who you were and that
Hmm.
person who you became,
Very
and that
different.
itself was encouraging.
Yes, yes, very different. Yeah. So tell me, so what you said the writing came from pain. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So, growing up, I'm the first of four. I'm a PK, as most people would refer to it, or preacher's kid. So my dad was a pastor, and I remember I wanted to write songs. That was my passion. Um, However, I would sit and write. And have you ever watched those movies where you see the writer write and then they crumble
Yes.
paper and they toss in the basket?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That was me. That was, and I'm not kidding you. That was exactly what was happening.
Wow.
I got so frustrated because back then paper was not cheap either.
No.
So to be tossing paper in the basket, and it was frustrating. So I
Hmm.
went to my dad and I said, Dad, I want to write. And then he said, well, read the Bible. And then he left. He never said anything to me after that.
Wow.
And I was just like, seriously, Dad? But then I pondered what he said. And for about 19 years, that's all I did. I just read. Um, I've moved to New York and I was living in New York, going to school. So this was right after high school. I went to school
Hmm.
and I started to go to school. Now, I saw New York as an opportunity of an escape because, my mom was very strict.
Yeah. I
Um,
can relate.
and it was a bit of a challenge for me. Um, but then I was in another environment where I felt suffocated and I felt like I didn't have a voice. I couldn't express myself
Hmm.
in a way for individuals to understand me and appreciate me for who I was.
Hmm.
Um, and it brought a lot of pain. And I remember at one point I had a really, really um, difficult argument with my aunt who I was living with at the time. And in that moment, I retreated to my room, locked my door, and took out a writing pad. And this was like at about 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. And I just started writing.
Mm.
And I stopped writing at about 3 o'clock the next morning,
Wow.
went to sleep. Ever since that day, I've not stopped writing because it was years of pent up pain, frustration, um, lack of self esteem.
Hmm.
Um, I carried a lot inside that I didn't express outside because I just didn't know how to. And
Right.
the few moments I was able to, it was misunderstood and misconstrued for something else.
Hmm.
And that in itself was frustrating. And that's how my writing actually came to be.
Wow, that's
And
great.
that's those words actually gave me an opportunity to start expressing myself,
Hmm.
and and then ultimately I started to speak those words out because through my writing I started to discover my own voice.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? So it was almost like a trial run. Your writing communication was a trial run to your verbal communication.
Yeah. Yes.
Because
Ah,
it's safe to write,
it is.
not so safe to
Speak.
verbalize and speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Actually, I
amazing.
like how you package that. It's safe to write, but not so safe to verbalize and speak. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
Because, like you said, you're speaking and you may mean one thing, but the listener is interpreting it in a different way
Yep. And that's what happens a lot of times
a
because
lot of times. Yeah.
we just don't listen. In my workshops, I typically speak to, we have two eyes,
Mm-hmm.
two ears, two nostrils, two hands, 2 feet, but one mouth,
Wow. Yes. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
because of that, I think we should work harder with our hands, walk faster with our feet,
Mm-hmm.
listen keenly with our ears,
Right.
inhale whatever is around us,
Yeah.
and keep a close eye at what people are actually saying and doing
Mm-hmm.
before we actually say anything.
And I love that you include listen in your workshops because that's such an important factor, like you said.
Totally.
Very important, and we don't do it often enough. Um, and yeah, it's really important. So I really like the fact that you are including that in the work.
Well, as I tell my attendees each week, the most important thing in a workshop actually is listening. It's not even
Hmm.
so much the writing,
Right.
because here's the reality of it. And actually, the perfect example was even this morning. Uh, when we stop and listen to silence, you're amazed at what will actually come out of
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Um, so I tell I encourage my attendees to listen to themselves, listen to the voices
Hmm.
that they're hearing, and just write.
Right.
But
Yeah.
in the reverse, when somebody is speaking, listen as well, because you'll pick up little gems and nuggets from that
Hmm.
person. Sometimes they'll say things that they never really meant to say, but
Right.
it triggers something inside of you and inspire you to do something.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost, be in the moment and
Yeah,
whole, concept of mindfulness and
absolutely.
yeah, pay attention. Because I think, human nature, we're always thinking as a person, as we're talking to somebody, we're as a recipient trying to think of, okay, what am I going to say next? And what am I going to, how am I going to respond to what he just said or she just said? Right. So, and we have this dialogue going on in our head.
Can you imagine that? A dialogue in your head,
Yeah.
and the person is dialoguing with you.
Right.
Which one are you really listening to?
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. But I like what you said about, when you were walking and you just you listened, because that's when I get some of my really good ideas is, when I go for a walk and sometimes I'll listen to music, but sometimes, I make a point of not even bringing my cell phone with me because I just want to enjoy and be present. And I'll have all these ideas coming to me and it's amazing. Yeah, what that little bit of silence does.
Silence is, I literally I say silence is golden.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, I'm not kidding you. I sat in my car for
Uh-huh.
over an hour this morning.
Wow.
Typically, I go for a walk,
Yeah.
but I decided I was just going to sit in the car. I had all the windows closed, but I could still hear the birds
Yes. Yeah.
flying around, and I heard those noises.
Yeah.
But it was quiet,
That's
and
great. Yeah.
in that moment, my spirit just came so calm, and words started just flowing.
Hmm.
And immediately, I just started writing. Um, but yeah, silence is golden. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid, even when you're having a conversation with somebody else.
Hmm.
You know, and there's a tendency, we always think that there should not be any periods of quiet.
Right. Yes.
Nothing's wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's we get uncomfortable when there's that little quiet. I'm
We
like,
do.
okay, what is he saying? All
And
right,
that's
who's
when all
gonna
the ums start.
like? Nothing's wrong with it. It is
No.
an opportunity to really feel the other person and to
Hmm.
feel yourself as well.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's important.
That's great. And so that's how that helped you heal and find your voice, the writing.
Totally. Um, the voice, the writing, the silence. Um, those are my uh, my source of strength.
Hmm.
And then my center is water. I love water. So
Yeah.
when it's calm, listening just the waves just
Yeah.
touching the shoreline,
Yeah.
and when it's really rough, just listening and feeling that energy
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
It helps me.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so your books, you do poetry as well.
So
Um,
poetry is my default
mhm.
writing. In fact, and one of my attendees commented in one of my workshops the other day, because I've been exploring trying to write stories
Mhm.
more so than poetry. Um, and what I've actually been experimenting with lately is actually writing stories.
Mhm.
But the challenge I have, because I'm so entrenched in poetry, A
Hmm.
lot of my language is very poetic. So I'll
Right.
tell you a story, but the language is very poetic. Um, and sometimes I do struggle with that. I'm like, is the reader understanding what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But then oftentimes, I'll tell myself, you know what? Just put it out there. You never know. Somebody
Right.
will appreciate it and
Yeah.
understand what you're trying to say.
And so, if someone wants to begin to write, how what advice would you give someone who, because I mean, we all know that journaling is very therapeutic and it could be very healing.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess a lot of people, maybe they shy away from journaling even because they feel, oh, what am I going to write about? Or, I mean, there's no right or wrong way. So, how would you encourage someone, let's say, to
Um,
start?
a couple of years ago, I developed a system called Start with a Word, and actually I've hashtagged it now with the
Yes, I
word
see it
start.
on your because I follow you. I'm on your list of followers.
So start with a word, and it's as simple as that. I encourage people just to start with a word. But out of the system, I actually created a Venn diagram.
Mm.
And what I encourage people to do is draw a Venn diagram. So three circles, all intersecting. Think of three words, just without, the first three words that come to your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Write them in the outer box, in the outer circles. And then think of another three words, write them in the inside, and then think of one word and write it on the middle. And then just look at the words and write.
Wow, that's neat.
So, I use it whenever I have quote unquote writer's block,
Uh-huh.
because it gives me a point of reference to create something.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you want to start off writing, that's a great tool to actually use. I call it start with a word,
Hmm.
3 plus 3 plus 1,
Right.
and then reflect on the words and write.
That's neat. Yeah.
Again, a key thing is block out the noise that's around you, because, like you said earlier, that voice in your head
Yes, it never stops.
never stops.
And if you think my external voice is loud, because my kids are always saying how loud I am, and I'm going, I'm not loud, but our inner voice is even louder.
Louder. Yep.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And
So,
so, tell me, when you wrote that night, that evening, what did you write about? Did you write about like what had happened earlier on in the day, your conversation with your aunt? I'm just curious if you can share.
that's a good question, And for years, I pondered that because, interestingly, I'm not sure what I did with the paper. Either
Oh,
I threw it out, I don't recall what I did.
uh-huh.
Um, but what it was really was just an outpouring of all the things that were happening with me. In
Mhm.
fact, I started off writing a letter to myself,
Oh,
and just basically telling myself, that Stephen, you're hurting. Um, this is what's happening, and I just started writing that,
hmm,
and if I recall, because I still have the picture of myself sitting on my
wow,
bed
yeah,
in the room with that pen and that pad. So I
uh-huh.
literally still have that picture, but the exact words I don't remember, because that moment was me emptying all the burden that was on the
Right.
inside. And I think after I did that, and that's why I tagged my brand as Release Expressions,
Hmm.
because after I did that, I released myself from that burden,
Right.
which freed me up now to start focusing on writing more inspirationally.
Hmm.
Um, I did a presentation a couple of years ago, and somebody said to me, I'm like, Stephen, that was really cool. What's your style? And my response really was, I take you from a dark place into the light. So a lot of my, especially my poetry, I start off with that dark space,
Right.
take you into the light. So I always end in a mode where you're actually seeing the light.
Right.
And that really came out of that experience where I was in a dark place at that point, but my writing actually took me out of that place and
Hmm.
brought me into the light.
And literally it did,
Literally,
right?
it
It
did.
just not on paper. And that's take in your bio where you're helping people get from where they are to where they want to be, because a lot of the times we're not where we are,
Yeah.
or we don't want
We
to
need
be
to
where we
be.
are.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, but we always imagine somewhere else. But the hard part is figuring out how do we get there, how to get to
Yes.
that place that where we want to be. Yeah. And for you, it was writing.
It is.
Like,
It still is.
that's an incredible story. Yeah.
Still is.
Right. And so it's not a one shot deal, because some people think, oh, I'm going to meditate for a month and then I'm going to be fine, or I'm going to journal for a month and then I'll be fine. But it's really a process, isn't it? It's a lifelong process. Um, just like, I'm a big advocate of lifelong learning. And this is just like lifelong learning. It's, we don't, our healing journey takes all our life. We're always on that healing journey.
It is. And that's just life.
It
You know,
is, yeah.
and if you really think about it, it is an amazing experience because nothing else on this planet has that ability. Um,
Hmm.
but it's in that journey that we're constantly learning and constantly growing. You
Yes.
know, our physical body may be shrinking and shriveling and
Hmm.
dying, but our spiritual or soul is constantly yearning to
Yes.
learn more and to grow.
Yeah, growing. I always like the now I'm gonna mess it up, I think. The quote, Rolling Stone gathers no moss.
Mm,
And I love it
mm,
because it doesn't. Like, as long as you're moving, as long as you're
moving.
growing, you're not gonna get all that stuff
Yeah,
stuck to you that you don't
yeah,
want. Right?
yeah. Actually, that's an interesting thought as well, Roseanne,
Uh-huh.
because if you know, and that's part of healing.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, when you're in the hospital and you're lying on that bed, if you stay on that bed, even though you're sick and
Yep.
chances are you're not supposed to move,
Mm-hmm.
but they always encourage you to do some sort of movement.
That's
Otherwise,
right.
your body's just gonna,
You're gonna lose all mobility,
yeah,
you
it
know?
does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. Always be moving.
Yes.
Even
Yeah.
though you may, and actually, this is something I tell myself constantly. Although you may feel stagnant, um, but always keep that mindset to keep moving.
Right.
Uh, you know, I could share you other stories, but that's probably for another time. But I'll drop this for you.
Hmm.
Um, and your audience may appreciate it. You may be struggling with something, whatever it is.
Hmm.
You're struggling with your own insecurities. Don't stay where you are. You know,
Hmm.
don't think of it as a struggle. Think of it as an opportunity
Right.
to get better.
Yes.
But we lock ourselves in thinking, oh, I'm struggling. You know what really is a struggle? A struggle is when you are making constant movement upwards.
Hmm.
That's a struggle.
Hmm.
Um, you're not falling back. You're fighting. You're moving.
Right.
So that's what a struggle really is.
Yeah.
Uh, oftentimes what people are talking about the struggle is just basically folding their arms and sitting back and not doing anything.
Hmm.
No, you ain't struggling. You've just given up.
Right. Because that struggling, that moving up the ladder, slowly as it may be, is a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And
That's
sometimes we fall back.
Right. Yeah.
But even though you fall back, you keep going,
Right.
because sooner or later, and I can tell you this, this is my own testimony. Sooner or later, you will break through.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not where I'd love to be, but I know where I am from where I used to be.
Right.
And it is an amazing feeling. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you don't stop. You never,
You never
ever
stop.
stop. You keep
Right.
going. You keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. That's that, you know what, that is some really good advice. Just, yeah, never stop. And I like the struggle thing because, everybody thinks that struggling is such a harsh word maybe or a negative word. But
Yeah.
you're right. Like we are all struggling. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But the struggle, and this part with the perspective that I bring
Hmm.
is the struggle is real, but the struggle is always there to make us better,
And it's
not
needed
worse.
almost, right?
It's needed.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at when you look at successful people.
Hmm.
One of my favorite idols is Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela amazes me every time because I
Hmm.
remember as a child, I was I was just I was angry at one point just to
Yeah.
hear why was this man locked up in prison.
Hmm.
But I remember the day I was living in New York when he was freed, and
Uh-huh.
I remember watching it on TV and listening to his speech. And this man, he struggled through life, but he
Hmm.
used his struggle to make himself better, not
Right.
bitter.
Right. Yes.
And he was able to forgive even the worst of the worst. He
Hmm.
forgave them, and he lived an extraordinary life. I can't imagine living a life like he
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
but it's a great example to help us to recognize
Definitely.
that, hey, struggles are there to make us stronger,
Right.
not to retreat, not to retract, and not to become complacent.
Right. Yeah. It's
Well,
the old, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger.
yeah, yeah,
Right. Yeah, I love that one too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if it does, make sure you leave the legacy for somebody else.
Right. That's right. Make sure everything's in order.
Make sure everything is in order. To
Yeah.
share, I've been following you as well, and I'm so encouraged by
Thank
your
you.
sharing, by your thoughts. I'm excited to see, you know, as you go further into
Hmm.
your own journey, and those that are following you, that they
Yeah.
are also inspired by your work,
I hope
and
so.
challenged to live their lives out
Yes.
accordingly as well.
Yeah, it's always, like my goal, and I'm sure it's your goal too, is always to inspire and to give hope. I think that's where all the goodness comes from,
Yeah,
is just, and like you said, um, not battling that inside, that inner voice, being able to express yourself.
absolutely. And that's the third part of my vision, sharing
Mhm.
stories,
Yes.
because that's when we really recognize that we're not much more different than the other person. Uh, the only time we see ourselves as different is when we don't listen to the other person's story to
Right.
realize that, hey, there is something in common. And it doesn't have to be a multitude of things that you're in common with. It could
Hmm.
be one thing,
Right.
but there's always something that you can relate to with that person. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to be lifetime friends. No.
No.
Um, but by listening to another person's story, you will be amazed at what you will learn and
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
you achieve. And that's, I love listening to other people's stories as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it
Me too.
inspires me. And actually, it oftentimes tells me, hey, I'm not alone.
Exactly. I was going to say you're not isolated. We're not,
Yeah,
when we hear other people's story, we don't feel isolated
yeah,
as, like we might feel when
yeah,
when we're just not sharing and not listening again, right?
yeah,
So that's so important.
yeah.
Yeah. And open, being open to listening because a lot of people aren't open.
And
And
that is a big part.
yeah,
We
yeah,
just gotta be open.
yeah.
Gotta be open.
And that is another conversation because then the ego, that's when the ego comes in, right? And the ego is fighting all the time. And I think if people maybe spoke without their ego present, the outcome might be better.
So that's a good idea. And that could be part of your next, and I'm not sure you could speak on,
Yes.
how to hone in on the ego,
Okay.
because it is a struggle.
Well, all right.
And
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
thank you for having me.